It is a chilling image. Dozens of people so desperate to escape Afghanistan that they cling to a US plane as it moves along the runway. At least 5 have been killed in the chaos at Kabul's airport, now one of the only places not under Taliban control. Elsewhere in the country, the United Nations says it's been getting chilling reports of human rights abuses as the Taliban take power. This report from our international editor, Lizzy, contains distressing images.
This is what desperation looks like. Afghans clambering over each other to get a flight to anywhere. Commercial aircraft have stopped landing in Kabul, so everyone knew that this might be their last chance. People climbed the airport walls to try to get in. Most airport security guards had fled, so there was no one to keep order. US troops on the military side of the airfield fired into the air to try to disperse the crowds. And several people were killed in the pandemonium that followed.
You can hear gunshots in the background. The gunshots have been increasing. The children are distressed. Our people have just one wish, and that's to continue our lives living somewhere peaceful.
There's only one runway for both military and civilian sides, so they rush towards US military aircraft evacuating American citizens with no regard for their own safety. And then this, an act of utter despair. 20 people, maybe more, somehow believing that they can survive, crouched above the wheel as the plane takes off. But in terribly distressing pictures, several fell from the sky. By this afternoon, the Taliban were at the airport, trying to restore order. They've said people are free to leave, but until commercial flights resume, how can they? In town, Taliban fighters were patrolling the streets and mounting roadblocks. They've reportedly been searching the houses of journalists, government workers, and those who worked for foreigners. It's not clear for what. This man we'll call Zia is in hiding with his family, hoping against hope that the Americans will rescue him.
The only hope for the future is the promise that the US government made to pull out their Afghan colleagues to safety. But I really don't know that how it would be possible to go to the Kabul airport if we receive the evacuation email from the US authorities.
Those women who are venturing out have adopted the burqa, which few in Kabul wore before yesterday. Most are staying at home, praying it won't be as bad as they fear.
I request Taliban to leave Afghan women and Afghan girls to go to schools and then to university and then to work as normal as it was. About myself, I really want to serve my people and I want to stay in Kabul and I don't have anywhere to go elsewhere.
But this was state TV at the weekend. And this today. They say they won't harm journalists, but the Taliban has murdered female reporters before. The Taliban form of journalism involves asking people on the streets what they think. The answer is that everyone is very happy. In a video statement, Afghanistan's new leadership said they would serve the nation and indicated that they hadn't been expecting such an easy victory.
We congratulate the whole Afghan nation, especially the people of Kabul and our mujahideen, on the great victory. The way we have come through was unexpected, and we have reached this position, which was never predicted.
Former President Karzai and chief negotiator Abdullah said they met the Taliban today. They're bitter and angry that President Ghani fled the country. All they can hope for from the Taliban is mercy. Afghanistan's new rulers are in the presidential palace, around the desk that belonged to King Amanullah. He tried to modernize the country in the 19th century. The Taliban, with their medieval punishments and views, plan to take it much further back in time.
Lizzy. Joining us now, Javed Ludin. He's a former Afghan Deputy Foreign Minister, spokesperson and Chief of Staff under President Hamid Karzai. Javed Ludin, Have the Taliban changed? You know them. You were in negotiations with them in Doha. Have they?
I think it's probably best to just see them in action right now. It doesn't really matter so much what I think if they've changed or not. I think in some sense they have, fundamentally, but in some sense they haven't, and it's yet to be seen. What's very important is to recognize that it's a reality now. A government has fallen and the Taliban are back in power. Now, the most important thing is that to see, and this is really will determine our conclusion about if they've changed, is whether they will now listen to the international community, they will engage. And it's very crucial that that happens because right now there is a total void of government on the streets of Kabul and throughout the country. And that's the most dangerous situation to continue. And I think this is very important. Now, I've seen a bit of a paralysis right now in the last couple of days from internationals in terms of engagement. The whole attention is on the airport, which is very important. But I think somebody should just rush in and tell the Taliban to now, for God's sake, form a government, because now they've taken it, they've toppled one, and they have to soon form another one just to get a handle on the situation on the street. And then also, I mean, there will be a further opportunity to determine how far the Taliban have changed if they then listen to the international community about their policies, about how will they, how will they treat women, how will they approach the question of public services and public participation.
But you raise a very important point right then. Half the people in Afghanistan are women, more than half probably. And the idea that these people who have treated women so badly for so long are suddenly going to be in some way decent to them beggars belief.
Well, they have, I think the only thing we have to go on right now, other than the fact that 20 years earlier or 25 years ago, they were in power in the same city. Other than that, I think so more recently, what we have to go by is, number one, their stated positions. It may be a little too early to judge by their actions because they've just been in power, but they have said repeatedly that they will be different this time, that they will allow education. But as I said, it's just to be seen what happens.
Okay, well, let's pause on that for a moment and just wonder why this has all collapsed so fast. You had the biggest superpower in the world at your shoulder, or very much more than your poor shoulder, and that thing has disintegrated into utter shambles.
Well, you don't want to, John, to get me started on that, and it's a whole book I could write about that. But I think what I would like to say is I'm in a state of shock. I just cannot believe that this has happened. 20 years of sacrifices have gone down the drain. But I think for now, my worry is more focused on what exactly is going to happen. I have family, I have friends, I have relatives in the streets of Kabul, and they're terrified. Now, the most important responsible thing now to do is, rather than asking questions what went wrong, is to actually see that in the next day, you have to invite the United Nations, for example. There has to be these various COBRA and various cabinet meetings in various capitals are probably okay, but at some point we need a UN-led meeting of all big nations in the region and beyond the region to then actually bring the Taliban to the other side of the table and tell them exactly the kind of government that they can live with.
But who can summon them? Who would get them to come to the table? Not the Americans, not the British, probably not the Saudis, probably not the Indians either.
The United Nations. I have reasons to believe that the UN has that kind of mandate if the Security Council mandates it. And I have reasons to believe that obviously the United States and NATO, Western allies, they have lost a lot of leverage. I don't think a lot of people will now listen to the US anymore. But I think the UN probably still have some recognition left, certainly among countries of the region. And countries of the region are the most important players now. It's Pakistan, it's China, it's Russia, it's Iran.
Well,
so you have to bring them together.
Javed Ludin, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry we haven't got more time to talk to you, but you've been very helpful. Thank you indeed.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Well, earlier I spoke to James Heapey, who's the Minister for the Armed Forces, and I asked him how he responded when he saw those chaotic scenes at Kabul airport.
It stands to reason that many thousands of them would try to get to the airport as a place of safety and a place of hope. And so I think actually in terms of what those scenes mean for our plans as the Ministry of Defence, we're content that whilst it means the airport has to be closed whilst the runway is resecured, actually we can continue with the delivery of our plan to extract entitled British nationals and those who have worked with us during our time in that country. But clearly the scenes are distressing, and I can understand why many people would look at them as reflective of chaos. It is chaotic, but that is the nature of these situations, and it's not something that our military personnel are not unfamiliar with dealing with.
People were falling off planes, and you talk of hope, but how realistic is it to offer people hope? How many people can you get out in the next 24 hours?
Well, from the UK perspective, we think we can extract around 1,000 in every 24-hour period, and we've got the air bridge in place to be able to deliver that. Clearly, the sustainability of the air bridge depends on the airfield being open and the arrival of 800 parachute regiment personnel by this evening and around 3,500 to 4,000 members of the US 82nd Airborne Division will clearly make a big difference. Between them, it'll mean that there's around 4,500 UK and US troops at Kabul International Airport by tonight, which will mean that we can have a more resilient perimeter on the airfield, which will allow air operations to be more routine.
And the fact that you've had this terrible, humiliating, chaotic scramble by people to get on the planes, it's a colossal failure of intelligence, isn't it, that the whole thing collapsed so quickly?
Well, I don't think anybody would be telling you the truth if they were to say that they foresaw the speed at which this has all happened. If I reflect on the conversations we were having in this building just 3 or 4 weeks ago, it was inconceivable that provincial capitals would fall as quickly as they have, and that Kabul would even be within Taliban sights by now. And so I wouldn't at all disagree with your analysis that this is quite a surprise to us all.
You yourself have served in Afghanistan. Do you look back now and think the last 20 years have been a sort of waste of your effort, that it was rather futile?
No, I don't. And the reason I think that is because I think back to the mission that I went to Afghanistan twice to do. And that mission was to deny al-Qaeda the opportunity to launch international terrorist attacks from Afghanistan. And I regard myself and the thousands of colleagues who served alongside me in Afghanistan as having been successful in that. Every day that I was serving in Kabul in 2005 or Sangin in 2009, I went out and I did my best. I was successful, and I'm as proud of what I did then now as I was when I first flew home from that tour.
Isn't it a reality that the work that you did in that country, that you were trying to do to make it, to stop it becoming a safe haven for extremists, now it risks becoming just that, a breeding ground for extremists all over again?
Well, no, I don't think that is the case. You may be proven to be correct, but actually the Taliban are a different entity now to what they were in 2001.
You really believe that?
They are seeking to come into government. Well, they're seeking to come into government in Afghanistan not as an international pariah, but as a recognised government. And I think that they recognise that the international community expects them to live by certain standards if they're to achieve that ambition. Now, I could be completely wrong. It could be that they haven't changed their spots at all, and that what awaits for Afghanistan is exactly what there was in 2001. But that's not guaranteed. And I think that we should see exactly how the Taliban do behave over the next few weeks and months. And we should be very clear with them that if they do behave in a certain way, that there is a route to them being recognised. But as the Prime Minister has said, No country should individually recognise them right now, and the international community should wait and see exactly how they do behave in the months ahead.
James Heapey, thanks very much.
No worries, thank you.